Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode of Unscripted and Unchoreographed. I'm your host Neve, the actor.
And I'm Sarah, the dancer.
And today we are very, very, very excited to have
Polina Shapkina, or Polly for short. I'm a contemporary circus artist based in Dublin.
Thank you so much. I suppose the first thing we'll talk about is how you got into the arts.
I was an artistic kid. I loved painting, crafting, putting on little plays for like the kids in school, etc. But like, you know, coming into my teen years, it kind of ended there. I had this like granddad who was a Soviet gymnast in his time, and he used to force me to do acrobatics and gymnastics, and I absolutely hated it. I couldn't stand it. So the second I hit maybe 13 or 14, I was like, Granddad, get lost. I'm an artist. Leave me alone. I'm never exercising again. Basically, I just didn't really do anything in my teen years up until my early 20s. I was extremely self-destructive. I think it was a pole class, and I just got like instantly obsessed. I was working at a bar at the time, and like the bar work and the drinking at the bar after hours was really getting in the way of training. And my boyfriend at the time was like, oh, you shouldn't leave this bar like in favor of improving your training because you've got a really good thing going there. You're friends with everyone. And I was like, no, I'm going to leave the bar work and focus on my training. I just became really, really obsessed with like training aerial, training pole for a while. I became an instructor maybe a year or two later. Then I started performing. And then I think it was around 2017 or 18, I remembered, I was like, wait, I wanted to be an artist. I thought that was my true calling since I was a little kid. And I just kind of got lost along the way. So I started trying to understand how to link the physical side of what I was doing with artistic, trying to express something, trying to marry concept and what it was physically I was doing in my aerial practice. It was a pretty long road. Like, I'm still learning. But that's kind of where I'm at now. I'm basically just like living my dream. I'm very lucky to say. That's my life story.
When you decided to be an artist, your granddad maybe not so much, your own parents, were they supportive?
My granddad, I remember in a phone call, was like, what you're doing is a Russian phrase, for stool and for stool, which means for sitting on a stool, which is like for the comfort of having a rest, and for stool, which is like a pretty crude way of saying a healthy anatomy. It doesn't really make sense in English, but he basically was saying, don't take yourself too seriously, get a job. Get educated in some kind of a job, like a concrete job. He was like, you're 25 now, like, come on, cop on. But my parents were quite worried about me in my late teens and early 20s. It was plain to see I was in a really bad way for quite a number of years. They were just really, really happy that I was doing something that made me a healthy, generally quite happy, fulfilled individual, because it really fulfilled me on so many levels and brought me back to life. There's obviously the physical health that constant movement gives. Moving to music is incredibly spiritual and therapeutic. The community, the different communities I've been a part of in like the aerial world, or even in like the fire performing world, which I joined a little later, the artistic communities fulfill you on another level. It kind of just like satisfies so many levels of needs. And I slowly just realized like I couldn't be arse partying anymore. I don't need that extra spice in life because it's now all around me. I'm getting that fulfillment from my work. And it did become my full-time work in the end, which was the dream. So, sorry, complete roundabout way of saying I'm extremely lucky that my parents were fully supportive.
So you did your training and you were doing lots of kind of workshops and training in aerial and pole. Like, I suppose for anyone who's kind of interested, where do they go? How do they do that? How do you become an aerialist?
There's the most studios in Dublin. I think there's like 5 or 6. So I started in a place called Tribe Fitness and Dance. It's great. It's a great community, and there's pole and aerial hoop, but also other classes there. There's also taking flight and fibs. There's aerial circ near Dridges Street. There's Petit Volant, which have been an incredible support to me on my artistic journey. Mari, who runs Petit Volant, she also has the the flying trapeze rig in Ireland, actually, that runs throughout the summer. So if you want to try flying trapeze, you look up Flying Monkeys. I think that's what it's called, yeah. And the studio Petit Volant is in Sandyford. But then there's an incredible studio in Sligo called Acro Air. The National Centre for Aerial Arts in Ireland, which is like my second home, my biggest supporter of all time, is in County Clare or just outside of Limerick, and it's called the Irish Aerial Creation Centre. So that's kind of Limerick Clare based, run by a company called Fidjify, who I work with quite frequently. They're kind of Ireland's like big aerial company. They've been probably my biggest supporters out of anyone. Incredible, incredible people. In Belfast, there's a Circus Full. In Cork, there's the Circus Factory, who've also been quite supportive on my journey. I'm probably forgetting one or two, but yeah, if you just look up whatever it is you want to try, if it's aerial or pole or specifically like trapeze or silks, maybe there's a studio near you. I'd highly recommend it. It's great crack. You don't need anything to start. Like most studios will have classes geared towards absolute beginners because they're mostly privately owned studios. I forgot to mention Dublin Circus Project is more like a community-based organisation, and they are currently in Cherry Orchard. They're great. They're not a private studio. Please don't be put off by you can't do a split or you can't do a pull-up or you think you're really weak or this, that, or the other. Like anyone can start. I couldn't do a pull-up. I couldn't go upside down. I was the last in my class to go upside down, which is like one of the core things you'll be doing a lot when you start. You just have to enjoy it class to class. You just have to get into it.
Is aerial like a umbrella term for, I know there's silks and there's hoops. What the different, I guess, is it apparatus they're called?
Yeah, they're called apparatus. I would call aerial like aerial arts. So some people would categorize pole dancing as part of aerial arts, and technically it is. It's in the air. You're still using your body on an apparatus. So there's so many. God, like where do I even start? But the most popular ones and ones that are kind of currently being taught, like in Ireland, would be there's aerial hoop, which is a really nice one to start on actually, because generally speaking, it is a bit painful. It's a hoop suspended from the air, and it's a nice one to start with because the hoop sort of supports your body even when you don't have a lot of strength. It's a quicker turnaround of satisfaction because you can already do a few shapes without actually having any strength or flexibility. And also it lends itself to turning. So when something is spinning, you get like so many frames, so many snapshots in your vision. So something gives you about 1 million pictures as it revolves, whereas something that is you have to work a little harder to spin in, for example, like a rope or silks, it's just a little trickier. So I guess it's a little bit more difficult to give someone that like 1 million pictures. So if you're working statically, for example, I think it's just a little trickier. Sorry, I digress. So there's hoop, then there's trapeze, which is the one that looks like a swing. It's like 2 ropes and a bar, and they're categorized as supports. Then we have verticals. The popular ones are cordless, which is a rope. You climb up on the rope, you wrap yourself, you drop, you dance in the rope. Then similar to rope, silks. So they're the pretty fabrics that everybody always thinks about when they think about aerial. There's 2 of them. They hang together, so you can split them in the air. You wrap yourself in the 2 of them. You can wrap yourself in the 1. So they're kind of the popular verticals. Oh, and straps. So straps are like 2 belts that hang down. There's different ways of using them. There's usually like 2 loops on the end, and you loop them around your hands. Then there is pole, which I've already discussed, just pole dancing. Very hardcore discipline. I don't do it anymore, but you need a lot of grip strength. So if you have sweaty hands, it's tricky. I have sweaty hands. Then there's a cocoon as well, which is like silks, but it's a loop. So it's a fabric, but it's in a loop. So that's a nice one to start on actually, because it's not as painful as the hoop because it's fabric. But when you're starting on the regular fabrics, it's really, really hard, tough to start when you have no strength. It's very hard to learn to climb, to wrap yourself. So when it's a loop, you can kind of put yourself in the loop and wrap yourself around it. Cocoon is a great place to start as well. I started with hoop, so I think that's my first and biggest love. But I do dance trapeze, which I love. I have an aerial moon, which is a recent addition to the family, which I have a love-hate relationship with. So it's basically a giant steel moon. A little bit like a hoop, but with a big chunk missing. It's a crescent shape. And then I do silks, but it's probably one of my weaker points in my mind. I try my best, but again, it's a bit of a love-hate situation. But it's different days as well. Sometimes I prefer one thing and other days I prefer another.
Is it very normal for like a lot of aerial circus artists to do more than one, like kind of hoop, or do usually they like specifically work on silks?
It just depends on the person. Like, if you're in, for example, traditional circus, and like you're in a family, and like your entire world is like touring, like obviously that's not me, but for them, it's like generally they need to have like many acts under their belt. Like their entire livelihood like depends on it. You're probably going to have a heap of acts, and like ground acts, aerial acts, or like whatever it is. You pick your acts and you do them as best you can. But then for regular people, hobbyists, or people in the contemporary circus area, it kind of just depends on the person. There's a lot of different reasons why they do a lot of different things. It is actually partially for opportunity. Like, I do work full-time as a performer, and it took me a really long time to get here. But honestly, if it was only aerial hoop that I did, I wouldn't be here, because the industry in Ireland is very small. There's not a huge amount of money in it. It's all about who you know. The need for performers and types of performers, I guess, varies. It's my opinion that in Ireland, if you want to be a full-time performer, you need to be able to do at least a little bit of everything. Unless you're like the most incredible aerial hooper and you can just do that one thing, like great. If you're somewhere around the middle, like I'd consider myself, then to kind of make a proper living out of it, then I do a lot of work performing with fire. That's really good moneymaker for me because it's easy to facilitate. You don't need to rig anything. And then lots of different apparatus. So if a client asks me like, oh, can you do those fabrics? I remember at one point just being like, oh my God, like everyone's always asking for fabrics. Like I just have to like buck up and just do it. And they're just really hard. Like they are just really like harder. I think vertical apparatus are really, really challenging. They're much slower rate of return on them. That's not to say the reason for doing lots of apparatus is purely driven by like career purposes. Like, oh, it's also just curiosity, interest, excitement. You just want to try as many things as possible. That's also a thing, and not to make it all about like money and making a living. So there's just lots of different reasons, I suppose, for why people would be into multiple different things. Like, I can only speak from my own experience. I see that it's either you become one of the best people at your apparatus, or you can be really versatile. And yeah, I guess I aim for versatility, but also it's just that curiosity for all the other apparatus as well.
Circus family touring, did you ever have that kind of want to go?
They have their own world. They've been doing this for generations. There's a couple of circus families in Ireland, and this is their whole shtick. This is their entire life. This is their universe. You don't really just like waltz up, hey, I'm going to run away with you. Like, people do that sometimes. Yeah, they have their own world. It's its own art form. It's a different world from the type of thing that I create and strive to create. I have on occasion done short little stints of work in like traditional circus shows for various reasons, and then I work with a company called Broken Theatre, who are amazing. Shout out to Jane. So Broken Theatre is a little bit like a crossbreed of that like traditional circus spirit mixed with contemporary performers. It's a little bit of both worlds, and every country is different. Like, for example, I know in the UK, the contemporary performers are very much more integrated with the circus families. So there's a lot more mixing going on there. In Ireland, that's not really the case for various reasons, but not that that's a good or bad thing. It's just, it is what it is.
I know you work with a lot of different companies, but you have your own company and you make your own work. How do you find creating your own aerial work?
Anything worth doing is probably going to be hard at points, but now that I've found what I love doing and what I know I'm here to do, as dramatic as that sounds, I do really believe it. I have a purpose in the world to make work. Like aerial arts, fire performance, and directing is just happens to be the form it's taken, but I believe this is my purpose in this world, and I'm very lucky to have realized that. Yes, there are many hard moments, but there are places where it's harder. Like, it's the systems that are here to support us, in general, in life, in Ireland. Far from perfect, however. Wouldn't want to be back in my birthplace of Russia at the moment. Total shit show. Like, no freedom, complete censorship. If I was to be an artist over there, like, forget about it. It's going back Soviet Union ways. This is why I have a problem with people romanticizing the Soviet Union, because it was not good for artists. So, yes, it's hard, but like everything is, any job is going to be hard at some point. I think we're actually quite lucky in Ireland to have an arts council in the first place. And yes, it's not ideal. And no, I'm not always successful, very far from it. And it's so frustrating, getting applications rejected or how competitive things are. And absolutely, it's hard to find the money to make your work. Like, I really struggle financially. The thing is, like, you just have to be tenacious. You just have to keep banging your head against that wall until a hole forms, like by hook or by crook. That's only speaking for myself. I know everyone has their own story, everyone has their own situation and their own like limitations versus the opposite of limitations.
Has there been a surge in the interest in circus art in Ireland in recent years? But like it seems like there's more funding available.
Again, there's levels to this, just from what I've noticed. And again, other people might correct me if I'm wrong. But what I have observed is that, for example, there are certain organizations, such as, but not limited to, a Fidgefi aerial dance, okay, that will receive types of funding that then are trickle down to artists such as myself, who, started with nothing and really wanted to make something. So it's through these big organizations that get, say, lump sums of funding that it trickles down to then people who are kind of more starting out in the form of like, yourself, like residencies, bursaries. Luckily with Fidget Feet, now speaking as an aerialist, so this is specific to me within circus. Aerial is specific to me, so I'm talking about Fidget Feet because they've helped me a lot. The fact that they exist and they receive that funding that does trickle down to the smaller artists means that the area of aerial arts is getting that support. So the surge in aerialists making artistic works in Ireland has just like kind of skyrocketed. If you're talking like per capita of like population, it's it's going really well. And yes, there are a lot more people creating work, especially in the realm of aerial. As for other circus disciplines, not really as much because, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong about this, but I just don't see any other larger organizations that have, for ages and ages, been supporting these other art forms. For example, juggling or acrobatics. Not to say that they don't exist, like people who do these disciplines and do them really well. It's a little bit tougher for them because I don't see quite as much focus or support for them from sort of elders in their art form.
I have seen your piece MAKOSH. If you wouldn't mind talking about like your creative process in making that, like how was that born? How was that created?
So there's a program called the Creative Intensive in the Irish Aerial Creation Centre, led by Fidgefi Aerial Dance. One of the directors of the company is Chantal McCormick, this amazing woman who's been running her company with her husband Jim for more than 25 years. They run this Creative Intensive course, 3 weeks long every year, for aerial artists that want to create like a piece. So I did it in 2020 during COVID. We were all masked and everything, but I feel like that was the first time, like I'd already started making stuff and trying to research very grassroots. How do I make things? How do I express things through physicality? I don't really know. I'm not trained in anything. I'm not trained in theater. I'm not trained in dance. So the Creative Intensive was my first time where I felt like I was in a situation trying to learn these things, how to get this toolkit for creation. And it was the first time I felt seen. I felt seen, and like the ideas I had value or, deserved to exist. The mentors that I had there, Chantal kind of being the main one, they encouraged, lifted up my ideas from obscurity, even in my own mind. Me not understanding them, not understanding how to put them out there. The course provides like a varied little dipping into different methodologies from different art forms like theater, like clown, like dance, little bits of everything, just to give you a little taster of different techniques you could potentially use to sort of express things that are, I suppose, abstract. And then in terms of influences on my work, where MAKOSH started, it's really funny because I keep trying to think about what in the world of circus or aerial arts is my biggest influence. But the reality is, as a kid who spent a lot of time in front of the TV when I was younger, my biggest influences are actually films and composition that I've watched through a screen. I'm into visually kind of driven surrealism. I'm into a lot of sort of avant-garde filmmakers. So I suppose MAKOSH, how I started my journey on it was I had these visuals in my mind. I had these images and I knew straight away what they symbolized. I knew straight away what the symbology of each piece in the image was. I have these images in my mind, like just coming out constantly. I put them on paper and I think about where what goes, whether it's like symmetrical or not, and straight away it makes sense to me what it means. The show itself is about delving into the subconscious realm, existential quest for meaning. It's a more or less autobiographical because that's what people kind of say. Like when you're starting out as an artist, like the thing you know the most about is your own world, your own experience. So that's a great place to start because you actually know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's kind of an autobiographical, but it's about a very subconscious place, like peeling back the layers of your sort of inner world and how it reflects the outer world. And like, what's it all about? What's the purpose? Why are we here? It kind of deals with this existential like dread and power.
Does MAKOSH have a definition?
So MAKOSH is a Slavic pagan deity which may or may not have existed in Kievan Rus, which is modern day Ukraine. It was a kingdom, kind of mixed cultural heritage in modern day Ukraine, and before one of the great kings there accepted Christianity. This is actually a strategic move. He was thinking about who will I make friends with, like the Arabs and the Muslim Empire, or maybe I'll make friends with like the Jewish, or maybe I'll make friends with, Christian Rome. Like, what's the most profitable way to go? And he was like, oh, Christianity. But before that same king had these effigies erected of deities, and the only female one amongst them was MAKOSH. The word has its roots in the meaning matka. So the word matka means womb, or mat syraya zemля, which means mother wet earth. I guess hypothesized, because nobody really knows, but it's kind of hypothesized that even before this Kievan Rus story, that it was kind of like an animist thing, that a lot of Slavic peoples were worshipping the earth and calling it Mother Wet Earth. So it's like a personification of the earth itself. Anyway, the reason I chose this was because I was and still am to this day always really interested in origins and mother deities and sort of the idea of like who are the OG kind of like gods and spirits that like trace it back. Who did people worship? Because it's a way of harnessing a sense of purpose from this absolute chaos that is reality. People create religions or ideologies or stories or origin stories, mother figures, father figures that like will keep you safe from like this chaos that nobody can understand. They're always trying to make sense of it. That's why we have, I believe, religions or ideologies or these sort of abstract systems or narratives that humanity has always had. It feels like it like protects us from the chaos that the reality kind of is, which in a not so roundabout way as I'm making it sound is the whole kind of point of the show MAKOSH, is that there's a person born into this world and they don't know why they're here and things are just happening to them. They're trying to kind of latch on to anything that kind of makes sense, anything to give them a sense of like comfort or a sense of belonging or a sense of purpose. It takes many forms. I think the OG thing for every human is like the mother that birthed them. It's the only thing that kind of makes sense. It's like the ultimate protector. And because the narrative of MAKOSH is a search for the comfort in knowing why you are here, it's called this mother deity who may or may not have existed, because it's disputed actually by a lot of historians, like whether this deity really existed or not, or whether people worshipped her or not. A lot of the records were like destroyed by the Mongols that came and actually like completely cut down Kievan Rus. Basically, that's kind of what the show's about. It's a completely roundabout way of saying it, but
The last question I kind of had was relating to the arts in Ireland in general and what you think could change or the government could do maybe better
Basic income for the arts continued for everyone. Basic income. It's not even that much money. I was really, really lucky, and it has completely changed my life. It's not that it's a colossal amount of money, but it's just that bit extra. I wouldn't even call it basic income, because honestly, if you don't work and you're on the €350 a week, what rent are you getting for that? It's tough. It would be tough for me to call it strictly a basic income, because I would see it as a little bit below that, taking into consideration like the cost of living in Ireland right now. However, everything else I have to say about it is just overwhelmingly positive. I have been able to just really, really, really focus on actually creating my own stuff. The quality of my research, the quality of like being able to just like take a bit of time to apply for things, more time to be in the studio. I still worry about getting gigs, and I still am getting gigs, but that extra bit of financial safety made the absolute world of difference. I just cannot stress. Everything has gone really, really uphill since that moment that we got it. You need to be proactive to make that happen. You need to actually have a plan and know what you want to do, when you want to make art. And I think it's your responsibility to go out and make it in whatever form it is. Commercial versus the most abstract thing ever. Everything has a place. It's fine. But I think the responsibility is there to be at least trying to do it. But yeah, incredible help. Can't stress enough how much benefit to my practice it's brought. It's really just allowed me to actually be an artist, what I'd consider going one step at a time in the direction of like achieving some kind of potential. So I think the government should please continue it and bring in everyone else into it as well. Everyone that applied. We need artists in our society. Like, anyone who doesn't believe that must find it hard conceptualizing a world without any music or imagery or media or anything at all that surrounds us. Like, it's just absolute nonsense to think about a world without artists. It's just nonsense. It's just like a complete no-brainer. Like, even before I decided, oh, I want to be an artist, like, it makes life worth living. It's a complete no-brainer. It's something about like the abstract versus the immediate physical world in front of us, and like connecting the two sometimes. And yeah, it's just important, and the government should take more steps to support it. But look, in all seriousness, I actually feel really, really lucky that there was even the pilot of such a scheme here. Like, it's really great. I just think it should be extended now to more people.
Very well said. Thank you so much.